Hello and a very warm welcome to St Mark's Church in Portobello. This video we've prepared for the 2020 Cockburn Association Open Doors Day in this very strange year when we can't open our doors for you to see inside this beautiful Georgian building. In this short video I'll take you inside the building and show you some of the features and history of St Mark's. But before we do, let's have a quick look round the graveyard as we walk up through it to the main church. St Mark's sits in its own graveyard, surrounded by trees, plants and flowers. In 2014, the boundary wall was repaired to make this space an open space for the whole community. It is part of the busy road of Portobello, sitting on its high street, passing traffic at all times, a centre of the community. St Mark's was opened in 1826 for worship and consecrated 2 years later in 1828. It is in the style of a villa or neoclassical design. The story is that it was built in such a way that if the church hadn't been a success, they could have turned it into a house, very like some of the other big Georgian houses around Portobello. At the time it was built, Portobello was home to many current and retired soldiers, and its founders included one of them, Colonel Robert Halliburton of the 7th Royal Fusiliers. Here, in front of the church, is a memorial to him. The graveyard was opened in 1828 and was renewed in 2014 with grants from the Heritage Lottery Fund, the All Churches Trust, Pilgrim Trust and the Scottish Episcopal Church, which enabled us to repair the boundary wall which had become dangerous. This has opened up the graveyard as a place for relaxation and reflection. We often have services outside in the space. We place quotations and opportunities around the graveyard. There is a peace pole, a prayer tree and a memorial garden. A really peaceful spot in the middle of Portobello, which is always open and accessible. Let us go into the church, glancing up at the huge columns as we enter the main doors and seeing the high altar in the background. As we go into the church space, we are struck by the cupola and staircase which were original to the building in 1828. It floods the vestibule with light and beauty. And so let us go into the main church. This was originally a rectangular building without the chancel added on at the end. It had 3 galleries on all 3 sides, and the original altar and pulpit may have been against the east wall on your left, whereas today the chancel is at the south side of the church. The history of the church in the 200 years since it was built reflects changing community fortunes in Portobello, as well as the changes in church practices and beliefs. During the late 19th century, church renewal and changes in ways of worship led the congregations to remove the 2 side galleries and build a chancel in the high Anglican style. This sits over the graves that were already in existence at the back of the church. The altar was placed against the back wall with steps leading up to it, and choir stalls were installed along the sides of the chancel, and a new pipe organ installed. 48 members of the congregation were killed in the Great War of 1914-18, and at the end of the war, a side chapel or lady chapel was built along one side of the main worship space, designed by Sir Robert Lorimer, one of the leading Scottish architects of the day, who also designed the Scottish National War Memorial at Edinburgh Castle. The chapel contained the tabernacle for consecrated bread and wine, and was surrounded by an oak screen with 11 arches, containing semicircular panels carved by members of the congregation. Only one of these panels is still intact after a fire in the late 20th century. In 1967, one night after a vestry meeting, a huge fire started in the boiler house under the north end of the church, and burned its way through the floor into the main church space, reportedly melting the candles on the altar. The Lady Chapel was badly damaged, and the panels separating it from the rest of the church had to be removed. A general reorganisation of the space was undertaken to reflect the changes in the worldwide church. In church practice and understanding, the priest no longer faced the altar during communion, but faced the people, emphasising everyone praying together in community. This meant that the floor in the chancel area was levelled by building up a platform with 2 steps, and then the altar rails were brought forward and the altar moved away from the back wall. By 1990, the congregation needed a meeting room, kitchen and accessible toilet. To make space for this, the area under the gallery was built out. The pews were removed and new comfortable chairs bought, enabling the church congregation to use the space for social functions as well as for worship, and to grow in faith using creative worship styles. This has been particularly useful in the setup you see at the moment, taking into consideration the physical distancing we need to be able to worship in these COVID times. In 2007, the old pipe organ, originally powered by water but subsequently by electricity, was replaced by a digital organ. The area which contained the pipes was tidied up and the pipes distributed for many different upcycling projects. To commemorate this important part of our history, local artist Barbara Hilliam painted an octave of pipes as saints through the ages. These now hang over our side altar. Church practice continues to evolve in each generation. Modern understandings of church structure puts a greater emphasis on the involvement of the whole congregation in worship, and there is a need for small and flexible spaces for different types of service. With no separate halls, the church is also a place for social and community activities, from orchestral rehearsals to local group meetings to art installations. At the same time, the 200-year-old ceiling is seriously damaged and the wiring is in need of an update. The level access to the building is inappropriate and detracts from the beauty of this Georgian building. We are therefore embarking on a building project which will enable proper access, welcoming spaces and a range of facilities for community activities, while also repairing the main fabric of the building. This is a long-term project. It would be wonderful to complete it in time for our 200th anniversary in 2026. But we are also aware of the added financial pressures on charities, individuals and grant-making bodies in light of this year. However, having a vision for the whole of the building, one that seeks to bring facilities up to the standards and needs of the 21st century, and which enables community groups of all sizes to use the space, will mean that slow, phased work can happen with a final vision in mind. St Mark's is a building which honours the tradition of building and of church life, but which seeks in each generation to reflect the needs of church and community as it serves Portobello for another 200 years. I hope you've enjoyed this short video of the history and the future of this beautiful building as it sits in Portobello. Its graveyard through the whole of the pandemic has been a blessing to the local community. This building will once again be a blessing to the community, a place of community activities, of laughter and fun, a place where we can weep with tears and hold each other in grief, a place to worship God and to develop our faith. One day we will be able to welcome you once more into this building. And until we meet again, may God bless you.